The December 6th. Please, everybody could be here, participate in this public process, due process. We have several items on the agenda, but as usual, our first items are to review the previous meetings, meeting minutes, and decision letters. So I want to give everyone on the commission time to kind of review those. And since we need to do that in a public forum, so we'll pause for about 2 minutes and let everybody re-review their notes, because we all get these early before the meeting, but we need to make sure we're deliberating them in this publicly noticed meeting. So. Oh, okay. Good morning, Metro Department of Education. Okay. Hello. How are we doing now? All right. I'm just glad the superintendent knows what we're doing today. Yeah. Okay.
No, it's the only good of my files.
And if it wasn't clear, we did hear 3 cases last month, but one of those was a preliminary, so we didn't take action. So there was no decision letter for that case. That's the Antioch Pike case.
That was the one down by 24.
All right, Mr. Chair, I'd like to introduce a motion to combine approval of the minutes and decision letters.
All right. We have a motion to approve the minutes and decision letters in one combined motion as presented. Is there a second?
I second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion?
I'm abstaining since I wasn't here.
All right. We have one abstention from a commission member who was absent last month. Any other discussion? All right. Seeing none, all those vote in favor of the motion by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? And any abstentions?
Aye.
One abstention. All right. Motion passes. All right, so I want to go ahead and invite our first applicant to come up, St. Joseph's Church and School, 1225 Gallatin Pike South. We're going to go through a process of introducing your case. Staff will read the technical and variance details, and then we'll give you 10 minutes to share your proposal. After the 10 minutes, we'll close that part of the discussion. We'll open up a public hearing. We'll invite anyone to speak for or against that may be in the audience. Anybody out there, please be thinking about any comments you want to make. We'll give you 2 minutes after you state your name and address. After that is over, we'll read any emails or phone calls or record any other public input, and after that is done, we'll close the public hearing, and then we'll have a discussion with you about the variance proposal. We'll make a decision. All right, Mr. Bowman.
Case number 1 on the agenda is case 2023-00019, St. Joseph's Church and School, final variance at 1225 Gallatin Pike South. APN is 051000158800. Inspector is Catherine O'Hara, Council District 7, Emily Benedict. Applicant's request, disturbance of the Zone 1 and Zone 2 stream buffer to construct a multi-purpose grass athletic field, and a retaining wall, continuous mowing and maintenance of portions of the stream buffer, relocation of buffer signage as necessary, modification of buffer signage to proposed as educational displays, relocation of sanitary sewer in Zone 1 and Zone 2 stream buffer. Appellant is St. Joseph's Catholic Church, represented by Sean DeCoster, P.E., CSDG. Comments. Stormwater staff. Applicant is proposing a mitigation area 2.36 times larger than the buffer area proposed to be disturbed. Codes, no comment provided. Planning, deferred to recommendation of the Stormwater Management Commission. Greenways, deferred to recommendation of the Stormwater Management Commission.
Mr. Bowman, did you read them? They're legal
Oh,
rights.
no, I did not. Sorry. Opening statement to the applicant. If you are not satisfied with the decision made by the Stormwater Management Commission, you may appeal the decision by filing for a writ of certiorari with the Davidson County Chancery or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of the Commission's decision. You are advised to seek the independent advice of legal counsel to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been satisfied.
Okay, if you would like to come up to the mic and proceed, you'll, if you have any questions about how to turn on the mic, we'll be glad to, they can just push it until it turns bright green. Oh, okay, sorry. We did the opposite last time, so, okay.
All right, thank y'all. Sean DeCoster and Jessica Clouser with CSDG. We're here today representing St. Joseph School. As stated, St. Joseph is proposing improvements to their campus that will eventually include a multi-purpose building, a new playground, a natural grass soccer and football field, additional parking lots, and revised driveways to improve internal circulation. The proposed sports field has impacts on the stream buffer areas, and we are requesting relief from these requirements in exchange for the dedication of additional buffer areas and the addition of educational displays. This is a similar request to what came before you in September, requesting a preliminary approval. The request remains the same, but the plan looks a little bit different just because we've updated our existing conditions based on a topographic, field-run topographic survey that was not available back in September. Construction of the field will require temporary disturbance of the Zone 2 buffer, as well as loss of some of the Zone 1 buffer area. The request before you proposes to mitigate these losses by converting all existing Zone 2 buffers outside the limits of the field to no disturb Zone 1 buffers, as well as dedicating additional Zone 1 buffer areas so that our mitigation rate is, as Logan stated, 2.3 to 1. The plan also addresses the conditions of the preliminary approval. We had meetings with, preliminary meetings with staff where we discussed the plantings. So we show tree plantings at the edge of the buffer to help delineate its location. We also include 2 educational displays near the parking lots for greater visibility and access. Proper documentation will be provided in our long-term maintenance plan. We've coordinated with Metro Water, Sewer, and staff regarding the existing sewer line and easement and have proposed to reroute that line so it's not going under our proposed wall. And we are showing a modified stream buffer signage plan that eliminates the signs along Lakewood Drive as was approved at the preliminary. We realize that there's technically no hardship rate based on the legal definition, but we are requesting your approval for the benefit of St. Joseph and the St. Joseph and Madison communities.
Okay, appreciate that efficient presentation. This is the second time we've heard this case. There are some changes, so we'll have to address those. Is there anyone here, at this point, we'll open up the public hearing. Is there anyone here who'd like to speak in favor or against the current proposal? All right, seeing none, do we have any emails, letters from council representatives, billboards around town?
There was a letter of support in your package from the council member.
Okay,
No other letters.
okay. All right, we'll close the public hearing and we'll open it up for discussion by the individual commissioners and questions. I'll start off with one question. It seems to kind of hinge on mitigation, right? So can you clarify exactly how you're planning to mitigate the Zone 1 buffer, particularly because I think that's the piece that's new. You're encroaching in. Were you planning to encroach on the Zone 1 in the last preliminary? Okay. Okay, good. So what aspects of this are new from last time? Can you update us on specifically what's changed? And then give us a little more details about your mitigation.
Sure. What changed was just the location of the stream itself. We didn't have the top of bank defined with a field run topo, so that shifted a little bit from what we were what was shown at the preliminary approval. The mitigation plan, the location of the field, all remains the same. Where the previous plan had a greater than 2-to-1 proposed mitigation as well. It was a little less contiguous from what was shown now. It was shown going up the sides of the building and up the sides of the field. Now it's all very contiguous and focused on the stream buffer area.
So the top of bank measurement, did that mean it was closer to, did that mean you're more into the buffer or less into the buffer because of that measurement?
The area around the field is very similar to what it was shown at the preliminary plan. The stream moved actually closer to Lakewood Drive.
Away from the field. Okay.
It got a little bigger towards Lakewood Drive. The field aspect is very similar to what it was at preliminary.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. All right, so in terms of your mitigation, you said you're gonna convert what would have been Zone 2 and treat it like Zone 1. Is that what you're saying?
On the display you have up at the bottom area, the areas that are shown in yellow are existing Zone 2 buffer. We're going to treat those as Zone 1.
Okay.
The areas in the pinker color are new Zone 1 buffer areas. And the area that's kind of pink with a crosshatch is existing Zone 1 buffer area that will remain.
All right, good. So you're giving us more than we had.
Yes, sir.
All right.
I think the last time we also discussed the location of the buffer signs and
Correct.
putting them adjacent to the parking lot versus above the retaining wall.
That's right. And those are best shown on C2.0. Yeah, I think it's that one. The Plan North parking lot, the buffer sign is in the southeast corner, right directly adjacent to the sidewalk. In the Plan South parking lot, it is in the northeast corner, adjacent to the sidewalk as well. Trying to make them visible and in paths where pedestrians and people going to the fields and in the parking lot, we readily see them.
On 2.0, I do see them on the fence at the top of bank.
Yes, those are the stream buffer signs. I thought you were talking about the educational displays.
Okay.
My apologies. Yes, we show them along the field and along that southern parking lot. Part of the preliminary approval was proposed that the commission proposed that they not be shown along Lakewood Drive. So we've eliminated them from that area.
Okay.
We're giving each other the normal kind of looks we give when we're close to making a decision. Just let everybody know.
I'll wait.
That's normal. Body language counts sometimes. It's just not a good legal precedent.
Sometimes we speak without words.
That's right. All right. So just for the record, there are no floodways, no flood issues, no structures subject to flooding that weren't subject before.
Correct.
All right.
I think this is better than before, but before you had Zone 1 buffer up against the building.
Correct.
In several one or two areas.
The new plan has allowed us to make it more contiguous and centered around the stream location itself.
It's a great example of applicant coming to the committee with a proposed plan for information only and coming back to us with an improved proposed plan for final.
Sounds collaborative to me.
All out there in the cyber world should take note.
And we usually reward that with a fast decision.
Therefore, I'll make a motion to approve as shown in the final plan.
All right, we have a motion. We have a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Jay has
Okay, oh, wait,
The only
wait.
thing I was gonna say is, I'm not sure putting the signs at the top of the retaining wall every 100 feet is really necessary, since they're supposed to just notify the people doing the maintenance and they're on the top of a retaining wall.
To me, the purpose for a sign is to keep, contracted services like that aware, not to get into it, but it's kind of hard to drive off a retaining wall into a buffer, so
We would gladly remove them from the top of the wall.
that's fine with me.
Maybe just put one at the very end of the retaining wall and just have one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all right,
So amend the motion to,
So you have a motion to amend the motion, okay. All right, so in our discussion, we have a motion to amend the motion. So let's vote on the motion to amend the motion first. So we have a motion to amend the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right,
the-
and the amendment is to remove the signs from the retaining wall, but to put one sign at the end of the retaining wall, just to kind of designate where the buffer starts. All right, and any other discussion on the amendment to the motion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so the motion is amended to remove the signs from the retaining wall except for the one at the end. All right, now we're back on the motion as amended. All right, is there any discussion on the motion as amended? All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you for the hard work. It's a way to do it. All right, I want to invite our next applicant to come up. That would be Miami Avenue, no, Licton Pike, excuse me. 5615 Licton Pike. If you'll come on up. So were you present to hear your rights of appeal? Did you hear the statement that was read earlier about your rights of appeal? Okay. All right, so we're going to go through the same process, and we'll come back to you after we've introduced it and public hearing, discussion, decision.
Case number 2 on the agenda is case 2023-00018, 5615 Licton Pike and 5615 Licton Pike. APN is 017-000-38200. Inspector is Tommy Biggerstaff. Council District Chin, Jennifer Frensley Webb. Applicant's request, uncompensated fill in the floodplain. Appellant is Lagina Sheldon, represented by Allison Davis, P.E., Collier Engineering. Comments, Stormwater staff. If approved, the applicant will need to proceed through the Clomer review process with FEMA and provide proper documentation to properties affected by a rise in the base flood elevation. MWS staff is also requesting approval from neighboring properties affected by a rise in the base flood elevation. Codes, no comment provided. Planning, defer to recommendation of the Stormwater Management Commission. Greenways, defer to recommendation of the Stormwater Management Commission.
All right. So if you'd like to start, I'd appreciate if you'd introduce yourselves, both of you, and usually one person presents, but if you want to have two people make comments within your 10 minutes, that's fine. So when we get kind of close to the 10-minute mark, I'll kind of give you a 2 sign or a 1 sign. Okay. That's always great. So, but take the time you need.
I'm Allison Davis with Collier Engineering, the designer for the proposed box culvert at the property.
I'm Jason Woodard, the on-site contractor.
Essentially, we're requesting 272.87 cubic yards of fill for the approaches of the one at 18 by 4 foot box culvert. That's pretty much it.
Okay. So do you have any mitigation proposed at all?
Yes, and that's in our package. We are proposing 10 trees to be planted along the banks.
But you don't have like a compensating cut?
No, it's not. We're doing approaches to a box culvert. There's no real reason to do any cut, and it would be in the floodplain anyways.
All right. We have a Am I back on? Okay. We have a presentation. We'll open up now the public hearing. Is there anyone here who'd like to speak in favor or against the current proposal? All right, come on up.
Good morning. My name is Justin Sturtz. I live in the adjacent property, 5535 Licton Pike. I sent an email with this information. I figured I would just briefly read my points, make it a little bit faster than having the council read the whole
So we give you
email.
about 2 minutes, okay?
Appreciate that. As I stated, my name is Justin Sturtz. I live at the adjacent property and I'm familiar with the amount of water that accumulates in the variance area. I wish to oppose this variance as is. The property is easily equipped to handle compensating 272 cubic yards of fill by grading the northwest end of the property, which is upstream from the proposed culvert. I would like to request proof that passing this variance will not result in an increase of flood levels. I have concerns about the construction being performed at this property as it has already negatively impacted the floodplain. Trees were cleared and fill was used to create pads without a CGP. Therefore, stormwater BMP was not used nor enforced. This increased the quantity of water in the floodplain as within and also within the buffer zone. It has also added sediment to the Coming Branch Creek. Can this regulatory agency ensure that passing this variance will not negatively impact the adjacent properties within the future? Thank you for your time.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate that. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment? For or against? All right, seeing none. Mr. Bowman, do we have any emails, voicemails, telegrams?
We had 2 letters of opposition, including the gentleman who just spoke, and then a letter of support from the council member.
Okay.
They're all in there.
What's the letter of opposition from a neighbor?
Yeah, so the gentleman who just spoke is one of the opposition letters. And then there's another one that's fairly close to the property.
Does everybody see that letter in their packet? Is it similar concerns? Does it state similar concerns?
The other neighbor was just about time frame of when the work's going on.
Okay. All right, seeing no other public input, we'll close the public hearing and we'll open it up for commissioner questions and discussion.
Since we have members from Metro's flood management team here and Stormwater, can we get input from them on what they see happening here? Tom or Roger, have y'all looked at the property and can you provide any input?
Have you any formal complaints?
It might be helpful if the applicant can state what the proposed rise is, because there is a rise that's proposed.
1.44 inches at the 100-year storm. Something you're never going to see in real life circumstances. And it's upstream, not the property that gentleman was discussing, I don't believe. It's an unoccupied vacant lot where the rise would occur.
Is there an area that's outside of buffers that you could compensate?
I mean, maybe, potentially. I'm not sure about 275 cubic yards worth.
Well, the term uncompensated is a significant term, even though it's a small volume of material. These things do add up. You know, if 5 people make that much of a fill in the floodplain in the same drainage way, it has an effect. And so if we periodically approve one small uncompensated fill after another small compensated fill, it adds up to people in that watershed. So that's we don't get to just consider this site by site. We also have to be concerned about cumulative impacts as well. So
What I'm curious about is alternative site plans that are typically required. I mean, all I'm hearing is we're doing a box culvert. We need fill.
I mean, that's essentially it. There's not really an alternative to putting in a box culvert, and you're gonna have to have fill for the approaches for that. I'm not sure what kind of alternative there could be to that. Your other option is to cross the creek as it is, for the creek essentially.
Well, I meant spans or just other bridge structures.
You would still have to, I mean, whatever you put in, it's gonna have to have some amount of fill. I mean, it may not be exactly 272.8 whatever cubic yards, but you're still gonna have to have fill to get a structure in there due to the nature of the banks as it is.
Looking at the plat here, there's a road. Oh, can you go back, Rebecca, to the road that comes in off of Licton to the left behind the houses? Is there an existing bridge there that
Yes,
crosses
but
the
it's
creek?
not all the owner's property.
But they have an easement to use that road.
No, the road frontage, it comes in off that central location right there, to the right of, what would be Luster Road. The other people that live back in that area do cross that, easement that you're talking about, and that's where the 4-foot culvert is placed. And it's at the location where the stream comes, from Luster area and then connects with Cumming Branch, and then it goes through that, 4-foot circular culvert there.
So it seems like a shared access road to some of the other properties, so the parcels 549, 551 that are,
That is, yes, that is. But our client doesn't use that access area. You know, wasn't planning on using it in the future.
Thank you. I'm just allowed. There we go.
Yeah, we just got to
Thank
make
you.
sure you're on the recording for the record. So.
Absolutely, yeah.
So one
There
of
might
our-
be potential areas in that, I believe it, I would have to say like is it the northeast corner of that front field that something could possibly be done with. We can look into options. I'm open to anything. I just want everybody to be happy when we get done.
have you been cited for driving through the creek?
No, that floodway's been there. I've been in that area since I was a child,
Yeah.
and that floodway's been there I'm 44, and it's been there in my entire existence, yeah. And so the neighbors actually use that because if you're coming from the Goodlettsville area to get to their house, they can't make that turn to the left to come in, just the nature of the turn. So they use that front area, there. And that's the only access they have to their property. They don't have any road frontage. Most of them people back there are landlocked.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a problem. My client, welcomes them to use it, gets along with them, so.
So one of the kind of gut checks or litmus tests we have is hardship. So can you speak to hardship? I mean, and I think agreeing with Jay, it'd be great to see some alternatives evaluated for minimizing impact here.
100%, yeah, I absolutely agree.
Yeah, the only hardship we're really allowed to consider is some kind of hydrogeomorphic anomaly that the ordinance couldn't have anticipated. So if it's kind of a typical site, mitigation is usually the only way to kind of offset that to make it lawful and fair to other applicants who'd come to us.
Okay, and that needs to be, the compensation is outside of the buffer zone, correct?
It needs to be a net gain to the buffer.
Yeah, so we're just basically we're compensating for the 272.2 tons, or cubic yards of, not tons, cubic yards of fill.
Well, there's sort of two dimensions here. You've got the buffer dimension, which is the spatial dimension, and then you have the volume dimension of the uncompensated fill. So you'd really need to compensate for both. So the amount of space within the buffer that's been removed and the amount of volume of storage that the floodplain previously provided. So because there are concerns about cumulative impacts. So
of course,
yeah.
And the portion of Cummings Branch that's kind of parallel with Licton Pike, the applicant did get a hydrologic determination. I don't think it's been approved by the state yet, but it showed it as a wet weather conveyance along that portion, so.
yeah, Marshall Boyd did that. And I'd had him look at it. I was looking into that earlier because honestly, I've been around there for a little over a year, and on Cummings Branch, there's there's water flow that comes down Luster. I don't know what that stream would be called, but I've only seen water in Cummins Branch, the area in question where we were want to put the box culvert in a couple of times, and it's usually been a few inches of water after. It has to be like a real massive downpour, real fast and pretty steady for quite a while. And then I've seen a little bit of water in it, but
So our general,
and that's what he did. He came and looked at it, and it picks up at about that 4-foot culvert. I'm sorry, I got lost. I was looking at that picture.
yeah,
up
that's
there,
all right.
But it picks up at about that box culvert where there's actual, there's still, there's flow in that area right there. And so it was deemed to be ephemeral. I sent that to you guys, and I have that, but I think you're correct. I don't think the state has reviewed it, but I don't currently know if they have anybody. The last I spoke with TDEC, they were all out of engineers or money to contract any. So I don't know where to go from here with that study.
Don't they put the burden on the applicant to hire a certified hydrologic
That's what I did.
determination?
Yeah, I have that
Okay,
report.
so you
with
have
me,
that,
actually.
okay.
That's,
So we're talking about a permit by the state,
well, I think
potential permit.
the confusion on that was not the review of the hydrologic determination, but the no-rise study. The state was reviewing no-rise studies, and they're not anymore. So that
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we have to go directly to FEMA because TEMA can't do it anymore. They don't have an engineer on staff to do it.
Okay. Well, here's our normal routine. We can make a decision or we can give you a deferral, let you go back and put together a more complete proposal. We generally don't vote on incomplete proposals. We're not really allowed to be your consultants up here.
Yeah.
That's needs to be worked out before you come back. So what would you like to do? Have us make a decision, or you want a deferral? A deferral would give you a chance of not losing your application fees and
I guess
filling out
defer then.
applications.
I'd rather defer.
And we're only allowed to defer for 30 days at a time. So is that can you come back in 30 days?
Yeah, that should.
If you can, you can come back and ask for another deferral. And then
Yeah.
okay.
That's what you give. That's what I'll take.
That's all.
I appreciate it.
That's all we get. So we give you what we get. So
Let's go
we
20
can't
days,
change
yeah.
that rule.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
can
sir.
I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Logan, if they can compensate balance cut and fill, does the site need a variance?
no, it wouldn't if they. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's another option.
So, but we wouldn't have to do a whole new submittal at that point, just submit the new
No.
plan and then
Yeah.
Yeah,
call it a
correct.
day.
yeah. Best way to avoid the government is to avoid the problem.
That's exactly right. We just
right.
want it to be a good outcome for everybody involved that's connected and everything else. I mean,
No
just like
speeding, no
every,
ticket.
I don't know too many contractors want everybody around them mad at them, although it happens quite frequently.
That's
you know.
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we try our best to work with folks, but we got to work within what we get. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
all right. So I guess we need to officially defer this, or is it an official, or is there another way that they can withdraw their proposal and go on their own way and work it out without triggering a variance?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so then if we can
I would.
defer for now, and then
Okay,
if we
that's-
do have issues balancing or whatever.
That legal protocol is what I was thinking.
That's what I
Okay.
would say. Yeah.
And let me ask, if they're not able to compensate for the cubic yards, the mitigation plan that they had offered was planting of 10 trees. Obviously, I think it'll depend on what they can come back to, but didn't know if they are deferring and coming back, if the commission had any additional recommendations on mitigation efforts. I guess at this point, it may be hard because we don't know the amount of uncompensated fill. Just wanted to bring that up so we're not maybe in the same situation the next meeting.
Are you planning on removing any trees that are there? With
Probably
your-
a couple just to get the
Couple.
box in. I mean, not any more than
Okay.
necessary.
And you're proposing 10, so that
Yes.
would be a 5-to-1 ratio. Okay.
Okay.
That
I think-
sounds adequate to me.
Getting to that is think about that area impacted in the buffer zone and that area that you would be adding mitigation and that 2-to-1 rule that the chair mentioned. So when you're coming back to us, think about a good rule of thumb is to be able to provide measure of what area is impacted and what area of mitigation is being improved?
Just clearly delineate those, try to improve the buffer. Okay.
Absolutely.
We like a net gain is what we're trying to get back. So
I believe we all do.
well, we do get benefits out of it. I mean, these trees provide cooling of the water, which allows water to hold more dissolved oxygen, which allows the water to serve more life. It does a lot of things. So we get a lot of benefits out of it. Maybe even cheaper drinking water bills out of it eventually.
I don't think that'll happen, but that would be great, wouldn't it?
Well, that's why we have them. Mr. Lindsay.
I think it would be Roger Lindsay, Metro Stormwater. I think it'd be important to know as well as if by compensating this uncompensated fill, that it eliminates the apparent rise that's occurring on offsite. Because even though an inch is not a lot, it's still something we still like to see a development go in without creating an impact on property that you don't own or control that belongs to somebody else.
That's a point well taken. I've got friends that have homes in floodplains who say the water got in their crawl space but didn't get into their air conditioning and heating ducts. They said it was within an inch of getting into my ducts. So it's a big deal to people, and it's a fair comment that the previous landowner made. It's a fair concern to be worried about flooding getting worse. So, all right. Do we have a motion? All right, I have a motion to defer. We have a second. Is there a second? All right, we have a second. Any discussion on the motion as seconded? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? You got a deferral. All right, so we'll have our next applicant come up. Yeah, that's what I've been steering towards that. Okay. Okay, so did all of you hear your rights of appeal read earlier?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So we're going to go through the same process, give you 10 minutes, public hearing, discussion, decision. Okay.
Case number 3 on the agenda is case 2023-00014, 2601 to 2611 Miami Avenue at 2601, 2603, 2605, 2607, 2609, and 2611 Miami Avenue. APNs are 052-1300-2000, 052-1300-1900, 052-1300-1800, 052-1300-1700, 052-1300-1600, and 052-1300-1500. Inspector is Linda Kelly. Council District 15, Jeff Gregg. Applicant's request: disturbance of the Zone 1 floodway buffer to construct 3 non-residential buildings, continuous mowing and maintenance of portions of the floodway buffer, relocation of buffer signage as necessary, allowance of green roofs and permanent permeable pavement within the floodway buffer, construction of marine rails within the floodway and floodway buffer, uncompensated fill in the floodplain. Appellant is Miami Land LLC, represented by Laura Mitchell, Rudy Title. Comments: Stormwater staff. Metro Water Services does not support Zone 1 buffer disturbances. Codes: no comment provided. Planning: defer to recommendation of the Stormwater Management Commission. Greenways request a standard conservation greenway easement over the floodway and the buffers.
All right. All right. So if you want to start by introducing everybody, then I'll start your clock after that. Okay.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Robert Passarella with Dale & Associates.
Adam Lefevre, counsel for Miami Land.
Miami Land.
Good morning, everyone. Like I said, my name is Robert Passarella. I'm here. Previously, Adam Seeger presented for you. He was not able to make it today. So upon deferral of last meeting, y'all requested that we survey the existing impervious area on the site today and map the previously approved FEMA floodway line, and we've done that and provided exhibits. Do y'all have those? Yes, okay. So for the existing impervious area exhibit, you can see that all areas in red were surveyed as impervious. The areas in yellow we had assumed to be impervious areas, building areas. Of course, over the years, buildings become dilapidated, fall down, and so the areas in yellow are only assumed. That was not just a random guess. That was based on historical evidence provided by the client, newspaper clippings, restaurant brochures, and such. And then the two blue lines represent the previously approved floodway line in 2001 and the now established floodway line from 2017. I believe that was all that was requested for the deferral. So,
Is that it?
yes.
All right. Okay, so we have the applicant's presentation. We'll open up the public hearing. Is there anyone here who'd like to speak in favor or against the current proposal? All right. Seeing none, Mr. Bowman, do we have anything in writing, video, or audio?
There are multiple people who sent letters of opposition, including one I'm going to pass out that is not in your packet. I guess I could read the property owners maybe that sent letters.
Horseshoe throws us off.
And the applicant has a copy of this as well. Let me read the property owners that sent letters of opposition, just so we have them in the record. There's a Lanny Moonaham that owns the property at 2630. Lanny Moonaham, 2654. Douglas Havron, does not say what property they own. Carrie and Jeffrey Keith at 2622 Miami. Chris Hessian and Jackie Hessian at 2628 Miami. And Kim Sorson at 2627 Miami.
Okay. And do we have any council representative letters or comments?
There's no comment from the council member.
Okay. All right. So seeing no other public input or comment or record, we'll proceed with closing the public hearing and have a commission discussion and debate. I guess the first question I want to throw out there, because it's the most sort of potentially prescient point, is can you put up an image of exactly what they're proposing to do? Okay. All right. So would you mind, since you didn't go through the details of this, would you mind explaining what we're looking at and what you're proposing to do and how that relates to the newly defined floodway buffer and other associated buffers?
Yeah, so we are proposing 3 commercial buildings with marine rails that would be constructed within the Zone 1 buffer per the 2017 FEMA maps. Again, they would just be commercial spaces with marine rails. Marine rails are almost like a trolley system for your boat that would be accessed from the Cumberland River. That would essentially pull your boat up to the commercial space.
And how many square feet of previous impervious area did you calculate versus what you're proposing now? And what's the difference?
So the existing impervious surveyed area was about 1,500 square feet. Again, as explained, we, based on brochures and other historical evidence, the potential area that was there, we calculated to be about 3,700, so about a net of 5,300 square feet.
Net gain or net reduction?
Net existing for the existing service that we did survey and then what we assumed was there previously. So altogether, with the assumed area was about 5,300 square feet. And our proposed for the image that you're seeing on the screen is 7,400.
So you're proposing a net gain of almost
2,000.
2,000, okay. All right, and then, so your rails would be in the zone 1 and your commercial buildings would be in the zone 2?
No, the rails would actually be in the floodway and the buildings would be in the zone 1.
And the buildings would be in the zone 1, okay. All right. Do you have any other comments? You have any mitigation or any other aspects that you're proposing?
The mitigation would be the pervious pavers and the green roofs that we're proposing, so that that all impervious area is treated on site, and that essentially it'd be as though those impervious areas did not exist due to treatment.
All right. I have a few questions. One, the estimated prior impervious area, did you use Google Earth imagery or anything like that?
Unfortunately, Google Earth imagery was either too grainy to decide or just didn't have enough historical evidence. So again, we were going off of previous newspaper clippings and restaurant brochures of codes violations of things that the client provided us.
Tax records, anything like that for square footage of buildings?
There were pictures and a codes violation file of some of the structures. And then the newspaper articles, pictures we took from those.
And the primary structure burned in 1973, so there's not much record, photographic record. We have a picture of the facade of the restaurant. It's been called a restaurant and a lodge that was there previously prior to it burning in 73.
Have you touched base with the geotechnical engineer or someone else to go out and assess the site to there might be footings from the buildings or things like that there that could help define the impervious area?
Again, we had sent out our surveyors to go and map the existing impervious. Everything else, again, was assumed. We've not contacted a geotechnical engineer to do borings or anything of that nature.
So, all right. One other question I had is, why do we need 3 buildings or structures as opposed to 1 or 2 when we're trying to minimize the impact to?
I did minimize the impact. There are 6 lots here. Each was a legally created lot. So we have, instead of presenting 6 structures, we've presented 3. So we have minimized. Originally, I wanted to build 6. And then when that was not approved, we filed the lawsuit. And then we have changed our plan, come back with half as much square footage. So originally, each lot contained an 1,800 square foot area of impervious surface. So I am at half.
And speaking of, let me ask, based on the Precision Homes versus Metro Government case from the 2019 Tennessee appellate session, how is this request distinguishable from the type of request that was brought in that particular variance request that went before the commission that was denied and then went up to the Court of Appeals and affirmed?
Right. The precision case was mainly based on inverse condemnation and whether or not precision in that case had exhausted its administrative remedies prior to. We previously filed a lawsuit with Chancery with inverse condemnation claims on floodway and with buffer zones. The floodway portion was dismissed, but the buffer zone portion stayed. Perhaps and more than likely because there's still an administrative remedy that wasn't exhausted. With the floodway, there was really no way to get it administrative because of the position that you can't touch the floodway. And so the commissioners here couldn't even decide, or we couldn't get before the commissioners on that issue because you just can't consider it in the floodway. So now we're back just talking about the buffer zones and whether or not these structures can be built in the buffer zones. And if not, then we're in the same boat as Precision, where there was a change in the usage of the land after purchase. That's a taking, and we'll be back before the court with that issue.
And in that case, you would agree that, I think what my question is, in that particular case, they asked for a variance request. It was denied. In part, I think that there was a review of the conditions relating to exceptional hardship and other aspects. So your current request is, are you presenting something different from an exceptional hardship that would distinguish you from what was brought before the commission in that variance request? Does that make sense?
It does. Per the commission guidelines, we do not have a hardship underneath what you guys normally consider. There's not a geotechnical feature that was unknown. There's not any, other than the fact it's on the river, there's not any odd topography that would make these lots exceptional in some way, shape, or form.
But it is commercial.
But with the exception that it is commercial as opposed to Precision, which was residential.
And because if you were coming here with a residential, that wouldn't come before our commission as I read the codes, because you can't build in the floodway, and for residential, you can't build in the 50-foot buffer as well. And is that what you're saying is a little bit distinguishable for, as it relates to the commercial nature of this?
The commercial,
Water-dependent structure.
yeah, the commercial with the rails is water dependent. There's a separate section in the stormwater regulations about water dependent structures.
I'm more concerned about the actual, not the railway, but the three buildings being proposed.
Right, and residential would require a pretty strict setback variance from the street going this way. And there's no, with the setback variance, it would make, without the setback variance, rather, it'd make the buildings in its present state not constructed. We couldn't build them without a setback variance there. So we have two things. We have setback variance from the street and then floodways, and we're being squeezed out effectively.
And are you going to have to go before any other Metro commission for the zoning aspects of what you're presenting?
What's our setback on the front?
Parking or loading or?
Well, parking, there is no parking. And that's the main purpose of the water structure, is so that boats can get up to the structure, because it's just a single lane or a small road and there's no place for a parking lot or anything like that. Anybody that would come to these establishments not by the river would have to be dropped off somehow. There's simply nowhere to park.
But that requires a variance, right, for parking reduction?
Are we
can do
in?
an easement for the
Yeah,
commercial.
For the commercial, we can do an easement for the
To
parking.
a off-site parking.
Within 600 feet, connected by sidewalks and?
No, this is a commercial transportainment facility, catering. There are 6,000 hotel rooms on Music Valley and Opryland area. So parking would be off-site and shuttled at the commercial businesses, hotels. It would be picked up. So this would shuttle to downtown Nashville, similar to Pontoon Saloon. And it's 25 minutes from downtown Nashville. It's 25 minutes from Old Hickory Dam. And historically, they used this facility as they did tours of Old Hickory Lake, Homes of the Stars. They also did educational, like school groups would come and go through the dam to see how a dam works and water, when it was the Sea Witch and Beach Lodge. So we're halfway between Old Hickory Dam, halfway between downtown.
I'm still struggling to think that there's zero parking requirement. And so I'd encourage y'all to get some sort of concurrence from zoning, because you're not in the UZO. You've got square footage of commercial use.
So we have 34 4 acres of commercial space on Music Valley that we also have ownership in
And
and can
off-site
grant parking easements.
But off-site parking has very strict restrictions that you would be triggered for variance, and that's outside of our purview. But I don't want to, if we grant this and then you have to park on it, then you're going to have to come back. And then as far as the calculations, you said all impervious area will be green roof or pavers. From what I'm seeing in the calculations, can you explain to me the delta that provides above and beyond the base requirement?
There would be no increase. It would just be an even.
So that's required to meet regs. That's not mitigation. And then what is the rail? I'm seeing you've got roof and you've got pavers, but there's nothing compensating for, the stick that goes out to the river. Is that concrete? Is that metal?
Again, it would be just 2 metal rail systems similar to a trolley. Vegetation would be able to exist under them and around them. And then as for mitigation, we can get with a landscape architect to provide us a planting plan to ensure that around the areas that anything removed would be mitigated for.
So I believe when you were last here, when we were discussing the rails, there's footings that would need to be poured and placed, which is a disturbance, and also adding impervious area, and that's not accounted for here.
Correct. This is not a final plan. We will have to go back to the Corps. The Corps could change this at any point in time.
So is this a preliminary variance application?
How's it stand today, Logan? It was a preliminary last month. It was deferred, so I guess technically it's still.
It was submitted as a final variance. Not a
But
preliminary.
it's not a final
So
plan. We
we're-
can't vote on a.
Yeah, exactly.
We've asked that you approve a water-dependent structure at staff level. That was not approved, and no reason was given at the staff level for why a water-dependent structure could not be approved. So that's part one. The second part is we ask for you to reduce the buffer zone to 0 so that we can go to the Corps and work with the Corps to create a final plan.
Are you asking for uncompensated fill also to build these buildings?
There is a minimum amount of fill, but there will be some.
That's not even included in this package.
And we need numbers, not just a minimum.
Yeah, this just seems like a very incomplete package.
It is a very incomplete package. We think it'll take us 3 years to get this approved through the Corps. So the Corps could dictate that the buildings are located in a different spot, the rail system is located in a different spot.
We can't vote on things that aren't, unless it's resubmitted as a preliminary variance. You're asking us to vote on a final plan, but that has to be construction documents. This doesn't include uncompensated fill. This is buffer disturbance. You're saying that it'll be 100% green roof, but that's not feasible to do the whole roof.
So could you just tell us that we're denied and then we'll go back to court and finish up the lawsuit? Or would Metro extend the tolling on the statute of limitations for the litigation?
But we can only discuss and debate and make a decision on the conditions and process for approving a variance. So, and you have an incomplete application. The other thing you also had an incomplete presentation because I had to kind of pull that out of you as we got into the discussion. So there's just a lot of unbaked aspects of this that would have helped us process it better and more completely for you. But all that being said, the ones that we've approved in the past that have involved replacing historic structures with new structures, they've gotten them all the way out of the zone 1. They've mitigated for the zone 2. And they've usually come back with less square feet of impervious surface than was there previously. And you're also proposing more. And what you are proposing is required by regulation, not meeting any mitigation requirements. So I don't know how we would be fair to any other previous applicant if we approved anything like this today.
Well, and I want to say, since our last meeting, I've thought long and hard about this case. This is the first case that's come before me as a commissioner where, as presented, everything is in the Zone 1 buffer or the floodway. So this is kind of a first impression for me as a commissioner. I know the commission or the committee previously had seen this before. And as I thought through this, I wish you were coming with maybe a preliminary variance request and not a final. And the reason is you all are coming to us asking for a variance, which means you bear that burden to kind of show how you're meeting the conditions under our stormwater manual. And as presented, I am still struggling to be able to even determine how you have met those conditions with the current plan. And I may have missed it. I'm not a trained engineer, but you're adding commercial structures to this where I would want to know what is the elevation of those structures, how that could be in the floodplain, how that may affect the neighboring properties. And right now with the plan as is, I think that you are unable to meet the burden of those variance conditions. And that's where I've struggled a bit. And also the fact that we don't have mitigation. Normally in these instances, we would see mitigation plans as well. So I will tell you, one of the one of the conditions, because there's conditions and factors that we look at. And one of them is that you would need to show, I'm looking back at my notes here. You would basically need to show that the variance request that you are asking is the minimum necessary considering the flood hazard to afford relief, the relief that you're requesting. The plan that's submitted today, in my opinion, does not meet that. And so for that reason, I think it's clear on this one that my vote is going to be no, but I have put a lot of thought into this. If there was a different plan that came before me, I may have a different vote on this particular parcel and the parcels that were in front of us.
Yeah, I think that the chicken and egg is that there really is no way to mitigate, I think, what you're looking for, considering that this is all either in floodway, Zone 2, or Zone 1. The structures can't be moved any further. They have to be where they are. There's no other non-zone area where these can move. The buffer zones go through the street. So it can't be moved. So this plan, although it might have been submitted as a final, is about the final of where these things can go.
Well, but the variance request in front of us doesn't have to increase the pervious structures on site. I mean, you can present different plans just because you are requesting to do 3 commercial structures. That doesn't mean that is the only type of option or plan that could be brought as a part of the variance request.
That's correct. And as far as speaking chicken and egg, historically, every project that we've ever had that needs a core permit or TDEC permit, we defer until those permits are secured. And so I would be hesitant to vote this down. I would vote for deferral just until we have those, because we can't approve a final plan.
We can't defer any longer. In this case, no offense, I'm pretty sure this will get denied. I don't think we're under the illusion that you guys are going to change the position from last meeting, change the position from what we're hearing today. And we need, candidly, a denial so we can take other avenues for remedies and recovery.
For a question for legal, we deny this, then they go to a different court system to appeal it. When they come for construction of a building, do they come back to us or is for uncompensated fill, for buffer disturbance, for?
So you're saying they win and then they have to come back?
No, it's not winning. They applied for buffer disturbance, but they need several other variances.
I think they would still have to come back.
So you would have to come back for other variances.
We would, and I candidly, although I haven't seen the order that would be entered on this, I find it a stretch to meet the burden of ambiguity, everything you have to show. So at that point, candidly, again, this would convert to an inverse condemnation suit that just seeks money.
And I do need to state for the record too, that there was more associated with the case that my colleague mentioned earlier than the condemnation issue you're describing, that they also tested each of the no votes testimony associated with that variance. They were going after multiple facets of that decision, not just condemnation. So, and so I just want to make that clear. That wasn't the only point that came up. Typically, to be fair to applicants, after we've had a thorough debate and considered all of our legal obligations and due process, we try to give them an efficient decision. Madam Counsel, do you have something you want to add? You have that look, that body language.
You can ask your question if you want. I think the question is about the water-dependent structure and how that impacts this. And the way we've always interpreted that staff may approve. This one it's not simply just a water-dependent structure. You have way more involved. I think that was really intended to cover where that's the only thing that's going to be placed there. Maybe just this, where you're adding commercial use and the amount of disturbance. Staff did not feel comfortable touching this one, basically, given all of the disturbances that are happening here. So anytime we've ever interpreted the code as it is more of a staff may, it doesn't say staff shall. It says it's permissible, basically. And in this one, staff didn't feel comfortable in any circumstance. Our precedent has always been when they don't feel comfortable with something, that it goes before the full commission.
Exactly.
And if that verbiage could be included in whatever order is entered, that'd be great. Just a little blurb on most of what you just mentioned, that staff did not feel comfortable approving it, even though it does have, in theory, the authority to approve a water-dependent structure. So if something about that can be included in the order, that would be helpful as well.
And one other thing, since sounds like you all are going to be appealing anyway, I do want to correct the record. I used the word pervious instead of impervious when I was saying that the current plan actually has more impervious square footage than what the original historic use, as you all had determined, and then obviously the current use to date. So,
and I want to clarify one thing. We in the future, it would not necessarily be an appeal of this board's decision. It would be this is what the board decided, and we can't do the proposed plan, and therefore we're seeking damages. So it wouldn't be in court trying to overturn the board.
It really doesn't matter to us. That's your right.
Right. So
Yeah.
to the extent you think,
But if you're worried about us taking it personally, no, we're not.
to the extent you think we would be back before you asking for something else.
Yeah, I will tell you, I'm glad to hear someone correct their statement, because I read word for word my testimony.
I read your testimony as well. So.
Exactly. So including my I think we're in there as well. So be careful what you say up here.
The other thing I wanted to add for the record about the approval of the water dependent structure is that staff was never given a final plan of a water dependent structure. So they're kind of put in a similar position as you are being put in today, is that you have a plan that doesn't show what is the structure, what is it going to do, how is it going to function, other than what you've been told.
Yeah.
So again, all these factors for consideration.
Can we vote on an incomplete?
If I'm understanding from the applicant, they're not going to give, they're never going to give they've given what they're going to give.
So I don't know why they even made it to the presentation.
We would be happy to defer for 3 years, every 30 days, if Metro would commit to us that our 12-month period is not ticking on the litigation.
I'm not with the litigation team, and so I can't speak to that. And that's exactly what I said last time, that we could sort of speak offline about that. I think that from what we've been told from the beginning, you guys have gotten what you're going to get as far as this plan is concerned. And so what I would advise you to do is you're welcome to do what you choose to do, but I would go through the record, look at what they've provided, and explain, if you so choose to vote, why or why not this is not an appropriate variance.
And I will say, my understanding as well is they have presented a variance request to us. We can make a decision on that request. To the extent they come back with a different plan in the future, they would have to refile the fee, and they could come back before us with a different plan. But I would agree with our legal counsel that this would be something that we could vote on, and this is what they're asking us to do, and this is what they're presenting to us today.
And I think every applicant deserves a judicious decision, so. All right. So do we have a motion?
First, I would encourage, since you are sort of talking about the fact that this is not a full plan, and you've said on the record your hesitations or whatever, but I would make a clear record, especially in light of the fact that you have asked for a full plan, as to why you're voting the way that you're voting.
So
Good.
maybe you should do what you typically do of what is the actual variance request? Because, there's multiple things here. They're encroaching on the buffer, they've got the marine rails, there's, multiple things that are tied to this. The variance request speaks to financial hardship, not necessarily, the hardships that we have to consider. And maybe we need to go back to the variance request, what information is or isn't provided related to that. And based on the plans, it looks like there's other variance issues that aren't even really documented well.
I don't know that we necessarily need to go through that amount of detail, with all due respect, just because of our experience with the previous appeal decision. And there's a lot in the record, including the applicant's knowledge of this ordinance before she bought the property, in the record, or at least email communications back and forth, that will all come out in the collection of evidence for whatever processes go forward. So I think typically we're instructed as commissioners to articulate our reasons for our vote, and this moment requires attention to that level of detail, and probably no more. So,
May I ask one more question?
just to move us along.
Yeah. So in the context of moving us along, in the future meeting when this comes back, if the Corps of Engineers does grant approval, then do we grant approval for their plan as presented?
We, as I understand it, we always have the opportunity to make an independent decision of the state and federal permits. I've been on this commission for 15 years. We've routinely stated that Metro follows its ordinance and its own policies, and there's at this point, I don't think there's any state or federal law that says we can't exceed state or federal law in our decisions. So.
So the last project had TDEC and core permits.
Right.
And
If we had chosen to go against that, we could have, but typically when we tell applicants to bring, typically when an applicant brings us a preliminary proposal, we try to give them the amount of information to have a fair understanding of what's possible, so that they don't waste their money going forward, so their investment-backed expectations are properly protected. And all I'm saying is I haven't seen us deny a case based on federal and core permits being granted, but we do have that right.
But just to your question, I don't think the Corps is going to be reviewing the structures themselves. They'll be reviewing the marine rails, which are in their flowage easement.
Okay.
The Corps is not reviewing
Yeah.
everything on the site, most likely.
The issue we're discussing would be the loophole in the area to be granted is the water structure, but there's no definition. Is that floating?
Yeah, this is one of those situations where the regulations or the language of our policies and procedures of how these decisions are made at the staff level are loose enough to provide some flexibility. Loose is a bad word, or broad enough to provide some flexibility to give the applicant a more efficient response. But unfortunately, when these kind of things come up, we end up having to write more precise guidelines and rules and ordinances. And I'm thinking the staff should go back and look at defining what a water dependent structure is, so that applicants are not in this, poorly processed investment expectation-backed procedure, because they're wasting their money if they don't know what's expected of them. And there's many precedents in the court system that say, even for land use planning, that investors should know what the community's broad community plan is and their individual zoning requirements, their individual land rights, so they don't waste their money and their time.
And one question though,
And I'm not faulting the staff by making that comment.
we're talking about a water dependent. My understanding, one of the commercial uses was going to be a standalone restaurant. Is that correct? And maybe I was under a misunderstanding.
All of the structures, the ground floor has to be a concrete slab that the rails go up onto. So to access a boat, you also have to have ramps and things to get up. So we've presented this minimal amount of structure. So we also have to have a green roof to mitigate this. So we've gone through and said, okay, we've got this bottom level. We have additional floors of other uses. But even if we don't put the additional floors of other uses, we still have this bottom level. So I don't know if, I'm not clear, or I would love for you to clarify if this were just an open air concrete slab, or if it were a concrete slab with a green roof, would it be approved? Is there anything that you would approve?
There's so many other things at hand. If it's, would building codes require a bathroom? This can flood. So how do you get ADA up to an elevated finished floor? There's the floodplain alone, much less than the buffers, creates a lot of different restrictions that have always been there. Yep. And so what I'm really torn on is, it's obvious y'all are trying to weaponize our decision. And
no, I just want to build.
Then you shouldn't have bought a property that had these constraints.
These constraints didn't always exist.
This wasn't floodplain in
The buffer zones
2014.
were if you remember from last time.
But if the buffers didn't exist, you would still have all these other challenges.
They moved
Regardless of the buffers, the floodplain alone creates significant challenges to putting anything there.
It's a challenge, but obviously there was something there in the past, and so it's not an impossibility.
It didn't mean that was compliant.
I think too that what we're trying to get across is that there was a structure here that hasn't existed since the 1970s. Then Metro came along and passed a buffer ordinance after that time period, I think in the late 80s, right? And then ever since that time, this committee has fairly consistently not allowed any type of development like this, where it had a green roof on it or not. Just about every applicant that we worked with, they pushed it all the way out of the Zone 1 where they had room to push that in Zone 1. That's why that case went to the appeals court, because he had no place to go. But we have approved some situations for like a barge or like a yacht club or like a marina, where those uses are contiguous and minor and have low impact and could be mitigated somewhere else. And there's no room to do that here. So I don't think we're treating the applicant unfairly at all. I do think there's some expectations here that are not in line with our normal practice of making decisions on these types of variances. We have never approved anything like this in the last 15 years that I'm aware of. And we've actually gone to the state appeals court on one similar to it.
And just,
I know we're all worried about this becoming a very negative experience, but I think we're at a point where we need to make a decision and just move on.
and just for clarification for the record, one thing, when these properties were purchased in 2014, there would have been a lot more that could have been done with mitigation, with location, things like that. But then when they changed the floodway and the buffer zones correspondingly moved up, that's when we came in the situation.
And you understand why that happened, right? Do you understand why that happened?
Why the floodway changed?
Yes.
FEMA, I assume, went out and remapped.
It's not a mapping or governmental exercise. It's a factor that more water is running off of the landscape because in the city of Nashville, we have hardened the landscape. So less water is soaking into the ground, less water is being evapotranspirated off of trees and vegetation, and more water is going into the river. And since water is matter, and matter cannot be created or destroyed, it can only be moved from one place to the other or converted from one form to the other. Floodplain rises, and they get remapped. So what we're protecting here is people not getting flooded by putting uses in buffers and floodways that make water quality and flooding worse. That's what we're.
And we don't dispute or deny.
And I really appreciate that.
Right. It's just more for the record.
Yes, sir.
When it was purchased, it was in a different situation of what could be constructed.
And we've dealt with cases like that before, but we usually dealt with it with mitigation. So,
But you're saying it expanded because the not me, not the Cumberland River created this problem, but Metro or construction, because there's a flowage easement and then there's the floodway.
If you've built a house in Davidson County or bought a house in Davidson County since after those previous floodway lines were drawn, we all contributed to the problem. We're consumers for products that increase flooding in Davidson County. That's a fact.
Also having more intense, short duration storm events
And climate
that
change.
stormwater facilities struggle to manage,
The
and just the
atmosphere is-
existing infrastructure. So
Did this
Go
not
ahead.
have floodplain in 2014?
It did.
It did.
It did.
I think it was about.
It's just wider.
80 feet.
it's wider
Wider.
with the
Since
2017
2017.
No, I mean,
designation.
but, the floodplain, it was still in a AE zone in 2014. Correct.
Yeah, but I don't know that I don't know I've ever seen any applicant admit that they shouldn't have brought a variance to us.
Because that,
discussion.
just the floodplain fact alone would have triggered variances then and triggered
Yeah.
many of the same
Yeah, the previous,
struggles.
in the 2001 flood mapping, that would make the structures existing be in the zone 2.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay.
Not buffer. I'm just talking floodplain, not buffers.
Let's let Mr. Lindsay speak. And I want to say a word about Mr. Lindsay because you made several references to staff. This gentleman is the provost of the National Floodplain Managers Association, so he knows a lot about this stuff. So, all right.
Predominantly, what occurred during the remapping that began by modeling in about 2012, after the 2010 flood, when the Corps of Engineers began the remapping, it marked the first time that we modeled based on LIDAR. We began flying LIDAR, and we fly LIDAR about every two years or so, and it allowed the Corps to go back into our existing models and more accurately reflect where the topography of the river and the banks of the river and so forth. The end result in that modeling actually reduced the base flood elevation through much of downtown Nashville, including this area around Pennington Bend, by a foot.
Yeah.
So
Better quality.
It's not accurate to say that because the maps that ultimately were released in 2017, that was based on that 2012 modeling. It was the subject of discussion that was held in I think a public meeting out at Adam McGavick at the Holiday Inn one night a year or two prior to when those maps were issued, where we discussed the changes that occurred to the floodway It didn't significantly increase the size of the floodway, but it allowed in the modeling and mapping process to more accurately reflect where that floodway lie. When you compare the GIS overlays of the 2001 map to the 2017 map, you'll see that previously the floodway came about a third of the way up these lots. Now it comes about halfway up the lots. You add the 50-foot Zone 1 do not disturb buffer to that, and you push all the way up again. The difference between the two maps, one is that the Zone 1 comes close to the front edge of those parcels, and the second one, it extends on into the street, and Zone 2 is well into the street. So there wasn't a real radical change in what was buildable based on the prohibitions defined by buffers, which existed in our regulations in the first set of regs that I began to use when I came to work for Metro. In the 2006 regulations, the buffer language was essentially identical to what it is today through at least three more revisions to those buffer, three more revisions to the overall stormwater management manual. So those buffer restrictions have existed for quite some time, obviously well prior to the purchase of this property. The other thing, just from a historical perspective, when we look at the development of the ordinance that became codified as 1564-170, the development within floodways, the original ordinance contained just the opening paragraph that said that no new structure could be constructed in the floodway. And then the city council advanced that after the 2010 flood, saying, this is bad business, let's don't do it anymore. And then over the course of the next 2 or 3 or 4 years, the city council came back and said, well, why couldn't we put a surface level parking lot? So they amended that ordinance to add surface level parking, temporary structures. We said to them, yeah, but at Metro Water, we have water lines, sewer lines, pump stations. Sometimes we need to build a utility structure that may be within the floodway. So that resulted in item D, the public infrastructure installed for the benefit of Metro government. The focus on water-related features such as bridges, wharfs, docks, and boat ramps, the thing that's consistent about those 4 items is that they're all in the water, at the water, or associated with the water. A bridge which may extend from one side to the other, and the on-ramp, the off-ramp is in the floodway. But it's still a bridge, it's used, it's water-related. I think this is the first case that I've heard that suggests that because we're going to put a trolley ramp down to the water's edge, that we're going to call this whole commercial structure up on the top of the bank a water-related feature. So it's the first time I've seen that kind of an application made for something like that.
And it makes sense why the staff interpreted it that way. It's not really why that flexibility was created. So it's meant to be a more direct connection between the two rather than sort of an indirect. Okay. All right.
Thank you for that information, Mr. Lindsay.
Excellent.
Speaking of historical context, if the existing buildings were there today that burned down in was it 70s? This business would still be in operation within that floodway. Is that correct?
Well, the 2010 floods that they showed just wiped out the whole property, so they would have been damaged.
Probably been damaged anyway, but had they not been. But my question is related to the time limit. This is maybe for Ms. Ladd. The time, is there a time limit similar to what Metro Codes or planning has related to certain types of structures that were there before and being able to build the same structure, whether it's a duplex or something that burned down? Is there a time constraint for which you are unable to use what was there before as a basis to what you want to do now? And this is related to the pervious versus impervious area. For example, Metro Codes, if you'd like to build a duplex on a property, but there's currently a single-family home, but years ago, before that single-family home was built, if you could prove that there were 2 NES meters on that lot, you may be able to get grandfathered in and build a duplex. So in this case,
I don't know if it's written, but on previous projects that we've had, it's always been a 5-year
credit.
As a rule or as a,
That's just what.
Common practice.
That's a common practice. I don't know if it's written in the manual anywhere.
and that's what I'm asking, is what is that? Is there a rule? Otherwise, we can't consider this last exercise of providing pervious versus impervious, or maybe we can. I just want to make sure that we're clear on what's allowed to be considered.
I'm not sure that the impervious versus pervious really has a bearing on the application or the decision.
But we have used it in cases where a house has been burned down, maybe a few months ago, there's a greenway component to it.
That's what I was
And we
thinking.
said that, okay, well, as long as your home doesn't exceed the amount of square footage that was there within that buffer before, then we're okay with this happening because that's the hardship.
Yeah, and it was a fairly recent structure, yeah.
Right. So define recent is what my question
Well,
to
that's
legal is.
based on specific Metro Code language regarding substantial damage. I think that's what you're referring to. There's a substantial damage clause in the Metro Code, but I agree with Commissioner Camp that this isn't relevant to, is there a hardship for their request for variance?
And the ordinance that Mr. Lindsay referenced doesn't speak to commercial buildings either. It's just residential. So if you had
A
obstruction of
residential
floodway,
structure in the floodway, and it speaks to 50% or more damage. I think that's the code provision you're talking about.
Residential only, not for commercial, really. So if a commercial building burns down in the buffer,
if in the floodway, if you had a commercial building and it got damaged substantially, you could not rebuild it per the code currently. It just says residential is allowed.
so it's residential only.
Yeah, we probably should have had this discussion last month because the applicant's here because we guided them to look at a, impervious per impervious replacement as a starting point for our discussion.
But that was also part of considering mitigation to the site, which they've not really come back with. And one thing I'd like to highlight is, as stands, there is no real mitigation. They're meeting the requirements for low impact development, but there's no mitigation for the encroachment on the buffer. But the applicants mentioned having other property on Music Valley Drive that could be potentially leveraged if the case is made that, there's not room for mitigation on the site. I think there could be room on the site, but it would be a, financial loss to the applicant to reduce the number of commercial buildings down to maybe one, and the footprints of the others proposed could be mitigation area.
Thank you for articulating my concern better than I could. I appreciate it.
That's what we're here for.
So if we step back, we can't approve it because there's no mitigation plan presented. There's no quantity of uncompensated fill.
Incomplete
There's no
application.
finished floor elevations demonstrated to say if we're going above meeting the finished floor requirements or not. So we have to make a decision on whether or not to defer or deny.
We can now based on which criteria you state.
Easily, if it has the votes. Yes, we can.
I guess one thing I would have liked to have seen is some creativity to, you all have done your homework, it's obvious, but it looks like what you presented did not address many of the issues that we have ruled on over and over again.
I would argue that they have not done their homework as to the application process, nor as to how it would have been more effectively presented. But, we've had to pull out a lot of details that normally applicants just give us in their presentation. But
We routinely give the applicants the opportunity to defer prior to going to a vote. So would you like to provide us this information, or would you rather us vote knowing you are not going to get an approval vote?
Yeah, due to the statute of limitations issue we're running up against for the kind of ancillary route, we would need a vote denying it, because before we could get back before you with complete plans, any type of approval from the Corps, we're 3 years down the line anyways.
Unless they'll give us a conditional approval.
Yeah, unless there's a conditional approval.
We can only do that on a preliminary application. A final application is.
So in that case, we'd request that the commissioners just vote to deny what was presented. here today. Because we're not, I mean, in theory, we could come back with some type of remediation, but it's not going to be anything substantial that I think would sway the commissioners at all.
It'd have to be off-site.
And I believe last time we were discussing, and I am sympathetic in the position that you may be in from a procedural status. And I think that was one of the things that we discussed at the last meeting is we generally prefer people to have gone through the Army Corps process or other zoning requirements before it gets to us, because then we know we have a final plan, what we're approving, then you all could move forward with. So I do understand the constraints that you all have from a procedural perspective. I do appreciate that. So voting on something like this is also a little bit outside of what we normally do as a commission, because we would have obviously preferred having gone through that Army Corps of Engineer process.
And we mentioned that at the last meeting, so this came up. Yeah, it's, typically we give deferrals to applicants who clearly need more time to understand something they didn't understand. There were several factors requested that weren't brought back, and there were several factors that our collaborative conversation have identified that make it impossible to approve this, and improve it. But
one more piece for me, building on Ms. Simpson's comment about procedural action. This is for Ms. Ladd again. I'm sorry to keep putting you on the spot. To help us understand the statute of limitations for this board, if it continues to defer and it goes beyond 12 months, I've heard that said a couple times now, 12 months, 3 years for the core, 12 months for statute of limitations. Is there anything related to?
So the statute of limitations, I think he could probably speak better to that. I mean, I know you probably want to hear it from me, but I was not involved in the litigation, so I don't know when they receive their decision, which is typically when that clock starts ticking. So I'll defer that to him, that he gives us the right answer.
In Chancery on the previous matter for building in the floodway, the majority reason why that was dismissed was statute of limitations on that one. So again, the chancellor left the door open for the floodway was there. Yes, it's irrelevant because you can't build in the floodway anyways. And the commissioners don't have the authority to overrule that provision of the both code and manual here. So that's why we're only here strictly really in the buffer zone, is because, I mean, for lack of a better term, the colloquialism, we got kicked out of court because of the floodway issue.
And from a procedural status, and I don't think I was a part of the commission at that time. So previously, there was a proposal that came before the commission where it was in the floodway pursuant to the code. That did not happen.
Not exactly.
Okay.
We couldn't appear before the board because of your regulations of not allowing something within. The board doesn't have the ability to approve that. And so it was you don't even have really standing to be before us because what you're asking for, we can't approve.
Let me say one more thing. I mean, they've alluded to the type of action they're going to take, but that's what they decide. The type of action you decide to take is also determinative of the type of statute of limitations you have. I mean, I have an idea, but that's within their purview, and that would depend. So I wouldn't get caught up in their time frame. Again, I'm going to refocus you on what you have before you. They're not going to submit another plan. So does this qualify for a variance? I mean, I think you've made a thorough record, but that's where we are.
I think I'm ready to make a motion.
And I just encourage every commission member to state their reasons for their vote.
So the variance as submitted is a request for the encroachment, including fill, excavation, clearing, and new construction or other development in the floodway and vegetation buffers. I make a motion to deny the application, given that the package as submitted does not demonstrate exactly what they're trying to accomplish. The volumes of fill, it talks about development in the floodway. It is unclear what is being applied for. So as submitted, I make a motion to deny.
Okay, so that motion accompanied several reasons that if you vote yes as a commission member, you're agreeing with, if the motion is properly seconded. So is there someone who has a second who agrees with the reasons and the motion that had been? All right, we have a motion's been made and properly seconded. We can't have any more discussion with you. I'm sorry.
Oh, it was not really discussion about the matter, more so
We'll
clarification.
do that at the end if you don't mind. Okay. All right. Guess, all right. So we have a motion. It's been seconded. Our next expectation here is to have a discussion on the motion. Does anyone want to add to anything about the motion, amend the motion? Is this the motion you want to pass?
I would just say, as a commission, we have to look at Appendix C of the Stormwater Management Manual when making a decision. F11 talks about the conditions for a variance, and there's 3 that are outlined. There's also factors that we should consider as well. I feel like we have discussed many of those factors and conditions during our previous conversation. And for me, with the current plan as it was presented, I struggled with F11. Well, I don't struggle with it. I'm making a decision on it, but the variance shall only be issued upon a determination the variance is the minimum necessary, considering the flood hazard to afford relief. We know this particular property was flooded in 2010 in its entirety, and based off of the variance plan that's presented, I don't think that it would meet that condition.
All right. Madam Counsel, do you prefer a roll call vote so each of us can comment, or do you think? Okay. All right. So we're going to have a roll call vote, and we'll continue that type of discussion if you so choose. All right. So, Mr. Bowman, would you mind reading each name of each commission member present, and then we'll ask them for a vote. So we're going to have you act like the Secretary of the House of Representatives.
Yes to.
Yes or no. And any other comments you want to add about why you're voting, yes or no?
Including Ms. Simpson, Commissioner Simpson?
Yes. Yes, she doesn't have to restate it.
Okay. Commissioner Simpson?
I would vote no based off of the previous reasons. The other thing that I would want to point out as well, one of the conditions for a variance is that a determination the granting of a variance will not result in increased flood heights, additional threats to public safety, or extraordinary public expense. Based off of the current plan and the commercial buildings being proposed, I do not have enough information to make that particular determination, and therefore, that is one of the other reasons why I would be voting no on this.
To clarify, you're voting yes to the motion.
Yes to the
voting
motion.
deny.
To deny the variance. Thank you. Yes.
All right. Commissioner Fulmer?
Yes to the motion.
Commissioner Camp?
Yes to the motion for the reasons previously identified. There's not adequate information presented to validate granting a variance for the properties in question.
Chairman Galbraith?
Yes to the motion.
Vice Chair Sandu?
Yes to the motion, based on the reasons outlined in Mr. Fulmer and Brittany's comments related to the incompleteness of the package and the regulatory approvals we typically need in hand prior to consideration.
Commissioner Lewis?
Yes to the motion.
All right. We have a unanimous vote. And since we did a roll call vote, we don't have any no's, we don't have any extensions, so motion passes. So your variance proposal is denied. All right. So would you like to would you like some clarification at this point?
I would on the order, because I think we were mentioning specifics about what the request was. The request in the application was to reduce 2 and 1 to 0. So we want to make sure
That's not what it says on the application form. I read that verbatim from the application submitted.
Do you have a copy? So the application doesn't mention buffer zone?
It says variance requests. The submittal is for the request of a variance for the encroachment, including fill, excavation, clearing, and new construction or other development in the floodway and vegetation buffers.
Okay, vegetation buffers 1 and 2. So the denial will say that.
It didn't specify 1 or 2. I think the order is going to refer to the minutes, which can refer to the video.
But the fact that your presented plans are encroach on at least 1, I don't know about 2. I don't remember if it encroached on 2 or not. That'll be self-evident.
Yep.
All right. That's part of that application material as part of evidence. Okay. All right. Any other questions?
No.
Have we treated you fairly?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Trick question.
Good answer.
I know you guys are bound by a manual and you
Well-
typically can't vary from that unless certain things are met.
Yeah,
So I appreciate that and no hard feelings at all.
yeah, and we're all Americans and, we believe in due process.
And that was a long, healthy discussion to give the due process.
Healthiest long one I've ever had.
Time in two cases.
All right. So at this point, Dr. Camp's going to have to leave us. So let's see what's next on the agenda. We have a special called meeting time and discussion item of business we need to take care of. So do you trust us to make that decision? All right. Okay, sure. Yeah, do you want a quick restroom break? Yeah, we'll take a 10-minute break for restroom. We'll come back, discuss the special called meeting. And please don't discuss anything in the restroom. I've always wanted a boat, but I've never met anybody that had a boat who said it was affordable. Yeah.
If they had a friend in the boat, painted it, finished it, they put it in the water and just floated it off. We'll save them $500.
No problem.
10 foot high and then go down to a cradle.
Yeah. Okay, we're live. Your mic's on. Okay. Meeting time agenda. So, Mr. Bowman, I assume you know what this is about.
Correct. So last meeting, we discussed kind of moving some of our items of business to a different meeting, possibly outside of our normal meeting time. I guess my first question is, do we want to try to have that before Christmas? I would assume not, but the other option is that we could have it after we get our next member, which would be after you roll off the board.
As long as I get to come as a designated driver, I'll be glad to come.
And I think that's what we want to have is collaboration, especially on the mitigation, compensatory mitigation discussion. So we can do that. That would be after the January 16th council meeting would be when that member that would replace you would be kind of coming. There's potentially only one case on the January agenda though. So if we didn't want to have the special call meeting, we just want to have this discussion at the January meeting, we could do that too. But then that new member would not be on there. So
We have a proposed new member.
we do, correct.
We asked them to attend.
I don't know if
They
it's
can
a
also
problem.
watch the recording.
Yeah.
I don't know how much input they would have without ever being present in the meeting.
It's a forester, right? Is it a forester
The
or a
landscape architect.
landscape architect? Yeah, so it might be helpful.
Well, there's some parts of that, like, I don't know if we want to have a different meeting on training, like we probably need to do an ethics training again, because we haven't had an ethics training recently, or what is, what even, like the appendix C, we could walk through that, or. I'm just
What
trying to
if we
figure out.
had the mitigation discussion next meeting, since that'll be my last
Okay,
meeting?
so we could just have the mitigation discussion, and then
And then
after that point, if we feel like we need to have a special call meeting for anything else, we could.
I think there's a desire to get on the water and, maybe see what we're protecting every day.
So I think, I'll defer to Tara, but I don't think we can do that because it has to be in a metro building.
Even if it's a special call,
Even if it's a special call.
non-variance ruled kind of meeting.
It's going to be a public notice.
It would be it would have to be publicly
So all
noticed.
public notice meetings have to be
There's a
in a
metro
metro
code
building.
provision. Yes, sorry, guys.
Okay, that's all right. We don't have any metro on boats.
Private party.
I bet there's a police boat we could get. Yeah, exactly.
My proposed place was to use the new stormwater building as the place. But that's
Is
on
is
the
there a
water.
boat ramp near there?
Hopefully it's not on the water. I haven't been out there yet.
Has their boat on at the marina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How big is it?
It's
It's up to y'all.
okay. So we can discuss at the next meeting if we
All right,
want to
that
do a
sounds
special
fine.
call meeting with like trainings and things like that.
Yeah, so who's going to be our mitigation speaker at the next meeting?
So we wanted to have Metro Parks, correct?
Yeah.
Cumberland River Compact,
Yeah.
and then you wanted somebody from TDEC about the mitigation,
Yeah.
stream mitigation.
Yeah.
And who would be, who, is there any opportunity with Metro flood buyback properties for mitigation? And whoever administers that, okay, Tom.
It's
Do you
fine.
administer that, Alco?
We can have him here.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think that would be very timely because that's one of our best mechanisms.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want. We could give a brief little update on what we've done. I mean, we've bought 450 houses to date, and we can talk about the funding sources for, through FEMA and how that's kind of drying up. But then we've been doing some projects through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and I can give you a little brief description on how those are different, but be glad to.
And a lot of those lots don't get revegetated necessarily. Some of that might be a mitigation option that could be considered. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Great. And y'all were featured in the New York Times about that national model.
That's right. About one moment. That's part of my 15 minutes.
You're lucky. That'll be the only one you'll have.
Can't do an informal gathering of the send off, reception or something in honor of your service.
Oh, you're sweet. No. But I would love to have a get together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we can do that.
All right. That sounds good. That's
Is there any other groups of people that we want to have at that good-story discussion?
any applicant that has been cooperative is welcome. So.
Oh, to your meeting, yeah, okay.
We won't make a list of the others. So.
You may have to help me make that list.
Yeah, that's right. All my memory is fading rapidly. Okay, do we have any other business that needs to be discussed? All right.
One last piece on this, just in preparation, maybe we haven't covered, I don't remember all your items, but in preparation for East Bank and other big ticket projects that are coming up that are in floodway, close to that zone, having an understanding of, having a game plan in a sense of how we're going to handle those would be helpful.
Okay. Yeah, we
How do
can
we
get,
frame that?
yeah, I believe planning is probably leading that discussion, but we can get somebody from the, whatever, East Bank group.
All right, and this one's optional. There was a study by planning department where they
I was
came
gonna
and
bring
gave
that
us a
up.
preview of this is what we're doing. We had requested to receive a draft of that in this past October.
Yeah, there's been some meetings on follow-up with that. I don't know that, I'll talk to him about doing a follow-up presentation.
That really revolved a lot around residential infill and some other best practices on the residential side that I think are going to be important for us to have knowledge of.
It seems like too in January, we typically have a update from Michael Hunt's group about was it discharge or
Tree
something,
planting
correct? Or-
and the annual
Yeah.
water report.
Annual water report, correct.
Yes, the annual report, just, we were directed to do a different kind of public notice this year, before we sent that in to TDEC and EPA, which we did, so it's put out through the normal Metro announcement. And it was passed, and we just earlier this week sent it to EPA, TDEC. What we normally do is either in the January or February meeting, come before this body and give you a summary of what's in the annual report
And the statistics, the pertinent statistics, and we'll make sure we arrange to do that. That's normally a 5 to 10-minute presentation, so we'll be doing that as well. But anything specifically, maybe to include a presentation on what all our office does, because at this point, we've added soil conservation, we add metro urban forestry activities, so we have expanded the breadth of what we do. So maybe a quick primer on everything we do at this special meeting would be good too.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful for this board to have a knowledge of who's on the staff at this point. I mean, You know,
Got a new forester too.
we don't have Steve Mishu on development services staff, or some of those people that you're familiar with anymore. So we could maybe do some organizational charts or something.
We got some good stories to tell.
We have those.
Yeah.
And this is just an aside. Yesterday, I was on Georgia Tech's campus and got to tour the Living Futures building that the engineering and school and others, School of Ecology, built. And they have an amazing landscape of native plants on that campus. They almost have like a series of greenways running through the campus now. I don't know if any of you all been down there, but they planted the trees so densely, that it looks like a riparian forest on their campus. And it was really well done. I counted 10 bioretention basins just around that one building. The building produces more energy than it uses. They claim to also have a net gain in water, but I don't know which storm event they're basing that on. But it was built out of recycled material from gyms and other buildings and other structures on campus. It's just an amazing structure, and it was full of students and young engineers studying the future of sustainable design. I left very impressed, and there are not many places like that in the Southeast, because I have my students study that, and we've just recently started going to Central Texas to study those kind of things, because the oil money's investing quite a bit in sustainability down there, trying to move to the new energy business and stay in business. But we typically have to go to the Northeast to see something that good, or the Northwest. But nice to see it in the South. So.
Need more of it.
And my home state of Georgia. So. All right. Is that it, Mr. Hunt? You look pensive.
Yes, the one thing, I know this board hears a lot of contentious in the sense of late star regs and people that think about 5 did have an opportunity last month to attend the Butter Leadership Conference associated with NACWA.
I can't.
Associated with NACWA, and it was interesting. I had a small presentation there during which a representative from the city of Cleveland, Ohio, mentioned that they had based their regulations in part on our regulations. So sometimes you don't maybe realize there has been a lot of work done by Metro over time to get good, sustainable, in my opinion, reasonable regulations out there. You never can eliminate the gray parts, which is where things come to you and often the staff. But I do think we have a good foundation of how we're regulating stormwater, always subject to ongoing evaluation. But I think nationwide, looking at how many people have looked at our regs and some incorporated parts of it, I think we're on the right track, it would seem.
It's really amazing. It says a lot about Nashville, because I was listening to a broadcast with Dimitri Kaladimos on the local talk show. This is Nashville, I think it's what it's called. And she was reflecting on the 2010 flood. And she said one of the things she remembers most vividly were how amazed the national news anchors were of Nashville's citizen response and how we responded with the buyouts of the properties. This city has always pivoted well and been a real model, going all the way back to civil rights.
And as someone who was in the emergency operations center doing that, I can tell you the FEMA officials were surprised at how things were being handled here too.
Yeah. Good community. Let's keep it up. All right. Anything else? Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn is a non-debatable motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, we're adjourned.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.